Hello everyone, Thyworm here with the good, the bad and the ugly regarding last Epoch patch 0.8.5. The patch released over 2 months ago. I've put around 200 hours into it at least. It is time to give it a proper review. The whole patch started with a trademarked hype week, revealing something about the patch every single day leading up to its release. Ironically, this was the least hyped patch in 3 years pretty much, looking at the Steam charts. It hardly even made a dent, this one. Sure, other people were playing some other games like Elden Ring and Lost Ark, but still, this patch in terms of numbers performed significantly worse, even worse than expected. And let's face it, expectations for this patch were pretty low. Reason for that was the announced content, or the lack thereof. And I'm not bashing the patch because it had almost no content, right? I'm just saying that there wasn't much there. I think a lot of people realized that and decided to sit this one out. And in hindsight, that was probably the right call. The overall impression this patch left on me, even 2 months after its launch, isn't necessarily a good one. I will dive deeper into the reasons soon. If you enjoy opinion pieces on Last Epoch, consider subscribing and liking the video. It really helps me out. First, let's start with the good. For me, the good mainly has to do with the monolith timeline stability changes. It took the devs a bunch of hotfixes after the initial launch, but I would say that timeline stability with the new changes and all the fixes afterwards is finally in a good place. On fast mappers, you still get plenty of timeline stability, although the speed mapping strategy has been nerfed. On slower mappers, playing endgame feels a lot better. I've created a super tanky ZDPS character and monolith progression still was kind of decent on it because of the new changes, giving you significantly more timeline stability for killing monsters in the map. I would argue that looking at a 1.0 launch, the game could probably ship like this. Timeline stability and monolith progression isn't that tedious anymore, it is fairly balanced overall and I enjoyed the progression regarding this particular aspect with builds I created 1 month after the patch launched. Overall, definitely a win. Another win are the newly introduced catalysts. They're spicier than the old ones and they're at least a serious consideration for a few builds. The ward generation and retention on some of them is nuts, and while it may not be the absolute optimum try-hard item you need, I think for just build diversity it serves a purpose, because not all builds need to be 400 plus corruption viable in my opinion. Small but decent changes can be found in the UI. Right-clicking a location on the map or an echo in the monolith instantly launches that instance. That is just really nice. Finally, the addition of Champions Gate is the last good thing this patch brought. I'm talking about the hub here specifically. I enjoy the way it is designed, that it looks down on Heoboria in the distance, that the lore kind of makes sense, and that because it is an arena, you have a whole bunch of training dummies at your disposal. I spent quite some time here testing builds on various dummies, just a great addition to a game that already supports a ton of build variety. The Champions Gate is a nice portal to the bad, because the first bad thing from this patch is the Arena of Champions. While the attempt to make arena runs a bit more interesting, shorter and more instanced is appreciated, fact remains it is arena. It is boring as hell, even for 40 waves, and it is generally not worth your time. The added uniques in later patches could be worth it, but I feel this isn't just that fun to do. You need to run all 3 difficulties before you can attempt the final one, which feels very artificial, and because this is required on every single character, basically asking you to play 120 waves of tedious grind, I ended up skipping the arena altogether. And the same I did for dungeons, which ironically solved the issue of no keys dropping, because you don't need keys if you don't want to play the new content. The dungeons, ladies and gentlemen, it is just horrendous, honestly. This patch introduced 2 new ones. I'm sure there are 5 people on the forum somewhere enjoying this, but the overall perception I'm getting, both on the forums but also from other content creators and people I talk to, is that the new dungeons are just terrible. They're way too large and long to be enjoyable. The randomization is technically there, but it has 0 impact on the dungeons feeling fresh or different, because all of them feel like a never-ending chore. The constant artificial roadblocks that hinder your progression are starting to get on my nerves, also because they serve no purpose whatsoever. The boss fights are okay, but the game doesn't let you properly learn boss fights, which I've made an entire video about, and the new bosses have made this issue particularly apparent. I was surprised to see, after making a forum post about this, how many people actually agreed. My fairly casual take on the game resonated with a lot of people, so I feel the devs should really have a good hard look at what they want to do with dungeons in general and with boss fights in particular. If you actually want to challenge yourself, by the way, at tier 4 bosses, suddenly keys become an issue again because you need one after you die, which I noticed once I started the grind. I think the overall dungeon implementation is a real shame, because I rather enjoyed the first one, the Temporal Sanctum. It had a fun game mechanic, it had a boss without bullshit mechanics, and it had a great crafting system attached to it. The contrast with the Soulfire Bastion and Lightless Arbor is enormous, and that brings me to the final section of this patch review, the ugly. The ugly has to do with the game direction, and that is a very personal subjective take, so keep that in mind. Dungeons sucking is just a generally accepted fact, let's be honest, but this is not. But it is why this patch leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. It is not just an underwhelming patch, which you have from time to time. It is inevitable, especially on a 3-month patch cycle. They're not all home runs, and that's fine. Sometimes just reaching the next base is plenty. But here it feels more like a first strike. 2 more and you're out. After a long period of steady growth on both a player count level and on a content level and on a creative level, I feel Last Epoch is starting to show signs of slowing down, or declining even. Clearly, hardly anyone was interested in this patch. Content-wise, not much got added lately that actually improved the endgame or the game overall. Creatively, I feel the focus is being put in systems that don't matter and that no one asked for, like the dungeons. What concerns me the most here is that this patch seems to confirm a trend, a deviation from focusing on endgame content. The game direction is going somewhere I am just not enjoying. We haven't seen new Monolith content for what feels like ages. Sure, a few echoes get added, but they're static content and you know those maps after playing them 5 times. It is just a band-aid on a festering issue called lack of randomized map layouts. After you've made your builds, there is just not really anything to do anymore. And this has been the case since the Monolith rework in patch 0.8.2, which released just over a year ago. I don't want to play more dungeons, especially if they're designed like this. I just want to spend my time in the Monolith, the main endgame system according to the devs. But somehow I feel that vision isn't really there anymore. Why not incorporate these dungeons and other changes in the Monolith so it gets more interesting? Even 2 months after the launch, I still don't get it. Campaign skips, my ass. Come on, we can run a campaign, that's fine. Just diversify endgame, that's where people will spend the majority of their time once they're grinding on their characters. I am missing this urgency to work on the endgame, and I'm not hearing it from the devs either. It is talk about these freaking dungeons. It is talk about multiplayer, which by the way will solve exactly 0 of the issues I just described and potentially, even likely, make it worse. Think about performance, or just practical issues like how the hell are you going to run Temporal Sanctum with 4 players? It hardly fits 1 player in there in these narrow corridors, spawning 43 monsters in the hallway. I feel Last Epoch tries to be different and distinguish itself from other games like Diablo, but mostly Path of Exile, but by doing that loses sight of what is important, for me at least. Endgame. Endgame, ladies and gents, endgame, that is all that matters. And it is such a shame, to be honest, because Last Epoch already has enough distinguishing features. It is very intuitive for new players, it offers great build diversity, it has these amazing skill trees, it has a bunch of clever uniques to create spicy builds with, but it fails and keeps failing in offering diverse content you can run with those builds. And with current focus on multiplayer, I don't really see that changing anytime soon. But more so, and I've mentioned this before, it seems the devs are content with how the Monolith is at the moment. It's come a long way, sure, and it's definitely decent enough for launch, but the fact they would implement separate dungeons, completely disjointed from the Monolith, rather than integrating it, that is strange to me. And that is not a mistake or something either, as Mike is doubling down on this philosophy during live streams. He said that future leagues, or cycles as they're called in this game, may have more dungeons. I hope not. Imagine a league being designed around a dungeon like Lightless Arbor. Holy hell, the thoughts alone make that light dim real quick. This is what worries me. This is what I mean with the direction taken, and it worries me because Last Epoch may turn out to be a game I don't really enjoy playing. I would feel that's a shame because although there are plenty of other great games out there, Last Epoch still has tons of potential, but it is currently not tapping into that potential from my perspective at least. Although finishing maybe on a semi-positive note, I have come to appreciate the current Monolith endgame a whole lot more after playing the 2 new dungeons. Thanks for watching. Sorry for not making a video for a few weeks. I was just taking a small break, enjoying the weather, enjoying real life, working pretty hard, and there wasn't much going on with Last Epoch anyway. See you all soon. Love you all. Bye bye.